Hey, Jordana, it's Jelly. Are you there? I can't hear you. You're cutting in and out. Okay, sounds good. Hey. Oh yeah, much better. Um, the stipend email that she sent to Linda Bird and the grant aid email. Not. It was all one letter. Can you forward that one to me? Can you forward it to me and then to my Yahoo, the Angelica Vilpondo at Yahoo? Okay, she wants to use it for this webinar today. Yeah, now she's asking me to postpone it, so it's awesome. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Angelica.
Hey, oh wait, hold on. Oh, I am not muted. How are you doing? I'm talking to everybody on this. Sorry.
I worked with Maureen earlier and she should be able to get on this time.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
So I'll have you guys on in the background, but just if you see that she comes on and we can't get her on, just holler.
Okay. She said that she thought she would be okay. So, Vanessa, I'm sending somebody else to you.
Okay.
But if she can't get to you, then I don't think there's anything that we can do from here. All right. Perfect.
Can you hear me? Well, let me see if.
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Well, wonders never cease.
That's okay. I just had a whole conversation with Jordana, and I didn't mute myself, so everybody heard it.
So Jordana, Jordana, are we postponing tomorrow? What's your call?
Well, I mean, that's fine. I need to let NASPA know. I think it's a good decision.
You think it's a good decision?
I do.
Then let's do it, okay? Rather than not do it.
Okay.
I'll wait till after this is over to do it.
Yeah. Okay. We have Maureen. We have 10 minutes, so.
Good.
Okay, and people are coming on pretty strong right now. Can you see on the screen, is it the FAQs?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to start with that or the other thing?
Yeah, I think that's good. And then let's go immediately to the one on no cost extension. No cost extensions, and then go to the top again. Does that work? and then
Yeah.
go to the,
Now, the other one on the COE board recommendations, it's just an email, so I'll put it into just a PowerPoint slide.
perfect.
And I'm sorry, go over what for the FAQs when we start. We're gonna go to carry forward first. What number is that?
Let me pull it up.
Oh, it's up, so I can do that. That's fine.
It's towards the beginning, I think.
Okay.
It's 9, Jelly.
Okay. Perfect. So I'm gonna start. We're gonna keep the top open for right now. I mean, we're
Good.
gonna keep it.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Scott. How are you doing?
As well as one could be doing on election day.
Totally understand. Did it stop sharing the frequently asked questions, Scott?
No, it's still.
Okay, good. Okay, that's great.
Oh, Angelica, I'm sorry. Before we go there, we should go back to the prior approval. We should go to the 13 and then 9. Could you hear me? We should go to 13 and then 9.
Sounds good. Okay, we still have 6 minutes, Maureen.
Okay.
There's not very many people on. It's stopped. Welcome everybody that is on. We still are waiting until the 3 p.m. Eastern time, which will be in about 4 minutes. For those that you are on, we will only be utilizing the Q&A box today. If you Please do not raise your hand nor put anything into the chat box, as we will only be focusing on the Q&A. I will mention this another time before we start. Thank you. And again, we'll begin in 4 minutes. All right. Good afternoon. This is Angelica Vilpando with the Council for Opportunity and Education. And I have with me today Maureen Hoyler, who is the president of COE, and Scott Robertson, who is the assistant dean of students for TRIO and Diversity at West Virginia Tech. Thank you both for being here with us today. Thank you all for being here with us today. We do expect very high numbers this afternoon, so things might get a little wonky. Please bear with us. Right now, we're going to talk about the FAQs that came out. I think as people were on a Connect, Discuss, and Learn webinar yesterday morning. So we thank you for the people who joined us yesterday that are joining us today. We thank you for those who signed up today that are with us. I am going to, in a few minutes, turn it over to Maureen Hoyler. Please know that if you need to ask any questions, please put them in the question and answer box. We will not be checking the chat box. Also, please, you do not need to raise your hand, as if you have a question, please go ahead and put it into the Q&A box. Everybody else besides the panelists are muted and will not be able to speak on this particular webinar, so your voice will be heard through the Q&A. The panelists for today are the only ones that have the option to mute or unmute. Maureen, are you ready to rock and roll?
Ready.
Okay,
Ready.
I'm turning it over to you.
Well, again, thank you all for joining us today. The department came out yesterday with their frequently asked questions for the Office for Competitive Grant Programs under the Office of Post-Secondary Education. For Upward Bound, for Mcnair and Student Support Services programs, as well as there may be some EOC programs on this call. There's a lot of good information in there. We're going to start with what we think is the most information, the best, the starting point for the memo, which is not number one. I would say that this doesn't answer all of our questions. At the end of this, we'll go over issues of stipends, some things that are still unanswered, and we'll tell you where COE is going from there. But as all of you are proceeding, I think the starting point has to be question number 13. Will there be any waivers to prior approval requirements? And what number 13 says is that while under normal circumstances, grantees are required to obtain prior approval from their department program specialist before making changes in the program or allocation of funds. As a result of the significant disruptions caused by COVID-19, the department is exercising this authority under the memorandum and will temporarily waive the prior written approval for the programs covered by this guidance. This waiver of the requirement that you need prior written approval goes for the period March 13th, 2020 through September 3rd, 2020. So after September 3rd, 2020, if you are trying to do something that requires prior approval, you'll still need to get prior approval. So in lieu of, as a substitution for prior approval, grantees must notify the program specialist of any changes in the project activities or budget. It says prior to making them. Of course, it can't be prior to making them because March 13th was 3 months ago. And so you've already gone virtual. You've already made these changes. You've already planned your summer program. So COE's advice is that you wait until August, and at that point you notify your program specialist of the changes that you made, as long as they're consistent with this regulation. With this memorandum and with existing regulations. So this does not waive all the things that we hope would be waived, but it does answer a lot of questions that we have. So I wanted to start with 13 because I think this gives you the authority to move. If you were an Mcnair program that was worried about providing food, or if you were a student support services program that was worried about providing hotspots or computers, this gives you the authority to do it, and you don't require approval to do it. So let's go now, Angelica, to the other one that I mentioned before this that I'm forgetting what the number is. Okay. Okay, so for student support services programs, in the,
Sorry, we're going to 16, correct?
I think is it 6?
16.
Is it 16? I don't think so. I think it's up. The
Not
non,
NCCs. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yes. Number 10. Yes.
okay, thank you.
Did you want to go? Did you want to go to the one-time extension first?
No, I did. Yeah, that's the one. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, it's 9.
So this is for student support services in the 5th year of their grant. Will the department approve no cost extension request? And it says Ed will continue its current policy, which it really isn't doing, but it will continue. It will allow grantees to request a one-time no cost extension as authorized in 200-308B2. Grantees may request a one-time extension of the final budget period. They have to do this at least 10 days, at least for student support services, by 10 days before the August 31st. So we would recommend that you wait until August to do this, and then you're going to basically say when you're going to spend the money by. So you can ask for up to a year, but you probably don't want to ask for more than 3 months. So that this is the equivalent of carryover for people in the 5th year they're granted. Allows you to spend money you haven't spent in 2019, 2020, and in 2020, 21. So it's a little bit confusing when you read this memorandum, because it acts as if you need to get approval for everything, and then when you get down to 13, it says you don't need to get approval for anything. So they mix up both their tense and their they mix up their tenses. But what this is, the memo is saying is that they're going to give you these approvals. That it's not as if the University of Texas is going to get approved and the University of West Virginia is not going to get approved. But you do have to go through that process of in August, telling them how you have changed your program. Again, I would say that you taking it virtual is a change in scope, so that you've taken it virtual, you've continued these services, you've added direct grant aid, the changes that you made, and that you still have X number of dollars that you wish to, and you wish to really say you want to use that money for things that you had planned to do in 2019-20, but were not able to do in 19-20. So let's go through the memo from the beginning, and hopefully this will answer people's questions. So most of what's in here, we've gone over in other CDLs, but we'll say it again. So salaries is the payment of salaries using project funds allowable even if project staff are unable to work. And the answer is yes. Let's go to 2. If an institution is paying student workers or is paying graduate student stipends or using fellowships, should the institution continue to pay those individuals? And the answer is yes. Let's move on to 3. Now, in that, you want to be thoughtful in the sense, let's say you're a Mcnair program that wanted to hold a workshop on X, Y, and Z, and you can't do it virtually, or you don't want to do it virtually. So you want to do it in October. So you don't want to pay that consultant who might have been a part-time staff member. You don't want to pay that person for something that you still want them to do. So you only want to use that provision of paying somebody who can't work in exceptional circumstances. Um, what type of documentation is required to account for time and attendance? Essentially the same documentation you keep all the time. The same documentation is required, but you might have to log in and out even if you're working from home. You might have to keep telephone logs. Again, what you're trying to do is to parallel what you were doing in an on-site session. Now, many TRIO programs keep more documentation than they need. They keep documentation of who signs in for a service. They keep those kinds of things are not required. You do need to be able to show that Mary Smith, if she was a student, did get services. But if you have your counselor notes from the academic advising, if you have tutor assignment forms where she got tutoring, you don't need her signature or his signature every time a student gets a service. Electronic signature, number 4. Are electronic signatures for documentation of expenditures permissible? During COVID-19, electronic signatures for documentation of expenditures are allowable. That is, it is acceptable to sign, scan, and email a PDF, where the department would normally require a different kind of signature. Provision of services. Are virtual activities allowable given the closure? How do we track participation? Let's go to the next page. The department, let's go. Generally, the department encourages grantees to, you have to go down a little bit, I think.
Sorry about that.
To consider substituting remote programs, activities that meet the goals of the original grant and enable students to continue project activities. If you don't know how to do that, have that discussion with your program specialist. But by now, if you haven't figured out how to do it, you're in trouble, I think. However, a project must follow its institutional organizational policies in response to COVID-19. If it says everything has to be virtual, then everything you do have to be virtual. You have to be consistent with your institution. Number 7, is it permissible to reallocate money from lines on the approved budget to purchase electronic devices such as laptops or tablets? And then you see the answer, yes. Again, it says in many cases it is permissible. You have to go down to 13. You don't need prior approval to make sure that it's permissible, but you need, we can all think of situations where for buying laptops might not be permissible. What if everybody what if an institution bought 600 laptops on a student support services program that served 200 students? Okay, so the reason there is cautious as they are is because these still have to be reasonable purchases. Could you pay $4,000 for a laptop that you could get in the store for $1,100? No, that wouldn't be an allowable expense, not because purchasing a laptop isn't allowable. It's because it's not reasonable to spend 3 times as much on something that you could get it for 1/3 the price. So that's part of the reason there is tentative in saying yes, in many cases it's permissible, because everybody can come up with 1 or 2 cases where it might not be permissible. But you can come up with those. Your program specialist doesn't need to tell you that. That's the reason they have 13 here. You come up with, you know that you have a solid documentation, solid reasons for purchasing what you're purchasing. And that and this FAQs is sufficient should be sufficient to allow your program office, allow your institution to enable you to conduct as strong a virtual program as you can. So again, since March 13th, COE has been encouraging you to have a virtual program. We haven't heard from anybody who said it's absolutely impossible for us to run a program this summer. Angelica, we haven't heard from anybody that said that, right? I mean,
Correct. Nobody has said that.
no, we're not trying to underestimate the problems of connecting certain students, the problems of getting good research activities for Mcnair students. We're not trying to underestimate the problems, but at this point, it seems that everybody who stayed connected with COE has taken their program virtual. Now, whether that enables them to continue to serve everybody, that probably is not the case, but a good percentage of students in every case are continuing to be served. We talked about the no-cost extension, the grant awards, the NCCs. So for Mcnair and for Mcnair and for student support services programs not in their last year's, and for EOCs, they're expecting to get those out in August. You know everything about APRs. Those are all in for TRIO. We haven't heard that any veterans upward bound were not able to file their APRs. So let's look at 12. Has the department considered how loss of wages may affect students' inability to pay for tuition? Yes, the department is aware that result of loss, some students may be unable to pay tuition. The CARES Act provides additional resources. So you need to work with your campus leaders to talk about how to get those emergency funds. By now, in most institutions, those funds are either allocated or scheduled to be allocated to entering freshmen. Let's keep going. So we went over 13. Again, when you tell them for Mcnair programs that you have unspent money and that you're gonna present a revised budget for 2021, we're recommending that you do it at one time in August, so that it can be bundled together with your approval of your 2021 budget. Now, student support services programs, all TRIO programs, including student support services programs, including Mcnair programs, including the June 1 upward bound programs that were level funded, are going to get some increase, probably less than 3%, because they're using some of the increased in the appropriation to fund additional student support services programs. So there's not just the same number funded, there's an absolute increase in the number of student support services programs funded, and the department still anticipates announcing that slate in early
July.
Thank you. Okay, let's go. Student support services programs. Under the student support services program, you can use money for homeless and foster youth. You can provide grant aids to funded. It may continue to distribute. Students should be advised that may use grant aid to cover added costs associated. Projects must assess to document students' participation in online services. Again, let's be thoughtful about this. You're giving a student a computer so they can continue to participate in your program. You want them to be able to say, or you're giving them a grant aid, you want to make sure that they continue to enroll in school, that they didn't drop out of school. You gave them, let's say on March 17th, your campus sent everybody home, and everything else was going to be online. So you started serving students online. On March 22nd, you gave a student a computer so you could continue to serve them and they could consider, by April 10th, they had dropped out of school. Well, you don't want on April 20th to give them a direct grant aid, which will wipe out some of their obligation to the institution. You want to make sure that if you're giving somebody direct grant aid, it assists them in staying in school. So you want to be careful about giving direct grant aid to anybody who has withdrawn. And you'll note that they have not waived the cap, the 20% cap in the authorizing statute. Ronald Mcnair, the department is going to provide virtual activities and to document student participation. So that's really it. So I think there are Mcnair research activities, our virtual research activities allowable. Yes, we are encouraged to the extent possible. Many activities are planned for May and beyond, such as graduate visits. Yes, during the COVID, the department will allow graduates who were participating in the Mcnair program prior to the graduation to complete these activities after they've in fact graduated. Okay, I think
that's it, Maureen.
I think that's it. I want to share with you before we go to the questions some recommendations that COE has presented to the department at their request about grant aid and about stipends. We haven't heard any response to those. So we've recommended that the Mcnair stipend, for example, we can go to Mcnair. With respect to Mcnair, okay, so we'll go to student support services because with respect to, we may be raised to 5,200, and with talent search, student support services and EOC, that projects be allowed to give $100 stipend. You'll notice that the frequently asked questions did not respond to those recommendations. That's not to say that we won't get greater clarity and an answer to these, but right now you can't act as if that has occurred. Similarly, we recommended that the minimum grant under direct grant aid be lowered. They haven't responded to that as well. So, and that it grant direct and the matching be waived. Again, that hasn't been responded to as well. So I just want to make sure that the things that we've asked for that haven't been answered, that nobody thinks that they've already been approved. So let's go to the questions and answers, Angelica.
Okay. All right, let me stop share real quick. Okay. All right, again, Maureen, questions were coming in as you were talking, so they may have come in before. Do SSS programs have the authority to award grant aid to all class levels of students now, or do we still need to ask prior approval?
Well, you can ask for approval. They can't give it to you. Remember that that's a legislative, that's included in legislation. And so until the department waives that requirement, which they have the authority to do under the CARES Act, then you're not going to need to ask for approval under number 13. But until they act on that, you can't do it, and your program specialist can't allow you to do it.
Okay, to clarify, we wait until August to send the letter to our program specialist.
That's our recommendation. Again, when you think about what you did between March 13th and today, you probably did a lot of things in May that you really hadn't planned to do on March 13th. And so what you want, because you don't need prior approval to do things, you want to be able to say, this is what we did this summer. and get their approval by notifying them of it. Negotiate with them your next year's budget. But to do it once and not have to do it more than once.
Number 13, I believe she's talking about the FAQs, refers only to the 7 things that require prior approval, correct? Or does that apply to things like changing physical campus tours to virtual campus tours?
Again, taking your program virtually from an in-person to a virtual program, in my mind, is a change in scope that requires prior approval under number 1 in 200.308 C1. Okay, like all these other things, it requires prior approval, and they've waived the prior approval requirement. So it requires you to notify them that you have done it. And so it's going to require a letter saying we had to eliminate this service, or we maintained all of our services, and we took them all virtual, and consistent with, you want to reference both the FAQs and you want to reference it and any regulatory things that you want to reference.
Can you talk about how student support services will be notified of their grants?
By your congressional office. Your congressional office will get a listing of everybody who's funded. Sometimes they have this in 2 parts, where they have everybody who's getting a new 5-year grant, and then several days later they send the congressional offices those that have a banked year. But your congressional offices, in most instances, will then contact your institution. Typically, when the first congressional office is notified, we notify the state presidents to contact the congressional offices, and usually within a few hours, everybody knows that they're funded or not funded, as the case may be.
We will also say, in the same breath, the Department of Ed sends out letters to the programs that are in the funding band to start that process as well.
At the same time, right?
At the same time. And again, COE will notify people as we hear that those are coming in too. COE will have a series of calls once that happens, if you're in the funding band, or if you find out you're not refunded, we'll have a number of calls for you to participate in. Okay, in light of our time, some employees may not wish to travel despite states reopening through COVID-19. Will Ed be open to directors choosing not to travel in the fall season, as the nature of the epidemic is still static, and adjusting to our out-of-area travel budgets to support student direct services?
Okay, remember, you don't have to get any permission to take money out of travel. You know, there's absolutely no requirement. There's absolutely nothing that says you would need permission to not travel, okay? Certainly not taking a trip is not a change in scope. You don't even have to tell anybody that you're not traveling. So the one caveat I would have here is, let's say your campus is going back to in-person service, okay? And you, because of your underlying health issues, do not want to go back to working on campus. That's fine if your campus has a provision that says people with underlying health conditions can continue to work from home. But you can't just decide that you're going to continue to work virtually if your campus is mandating that. You have to, in terms of your virtual participation or you have to be consistent with your campus's directives. Does that make sense? it's not related to travel. It's just related to, you know, how you're going to serve students if your campus is doing in-person service.
Will there be a cap on the amount of carryover?
No, the department has already said that they are not capping the amount of carryover, and this would, for student support services, most likely apply to the amount that you're able to take into the next year by extending the last day of your grant.
How does requesting an extension affect SSS programs in their final year? Is this advantageous?
Well, it's advantageous. It depends what you mean in their final year. If you're not continued, if that's what you mean by in your final year, they're only going to allow you enough money to close out. If what you mean by in their final year, you just mean you're in the 5th year of your current grant cycle and you're moving into a new 5-year grant cycle.
I think that's what this person meant.
It's advantageous because you got more money to spend. But if you can thoughtfully spend it before August 31st, there's no particular advantage in carrying it into September and October.
Sorry, I'm not unmuted. Okay. Question, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Question number 9, we can ask for an extension for 3 months to no more than a year.
Okay, again, you want to wait till August, okay? And then you'll know how much money you have to spend. And clearly you're not going to ask, I would assume that if you were serving students between September 1 and March 17th, you spent 80% of your budget or 65% of your budget or whatever. So, and then you continue to spend money. So you're going to have a little bit of money, maybe or maybe not. And you can spend that within 1 or 2 months. I would presume that you can anyway. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it permission to buy computers for students to keep or only to loan?
Okay. I'm plugging in my computer again, so. Computers in almost every instance are a supply. That means they're a consumable. Okay, if you bought another supply and gave it to a student, you would most typically let them keep it, okay? But let's say you bought a computer for a student and they dropped out of school. Would you try to get that computer back? Yeah, I mean, so as you discuss it, you use the language that they use in the memorandum. You're giving them the computer so they can continue to be enrolled in school and continue to get your services. You don't say, well, we're just giving this to you to give it to you as a gift. We're giving it to you for a reason. I know it sounds like I'm just playing with words here. So I would not say loan, I would not say give. I would say we're providing you this computer so you can continue to get these services. If the student continues to be in your program for 2 or 3 years, the computer or the Chromebook or whatever has no value and you don't go back and get it. If the student drops out of school 2 weeks later, then you handle it differently. But in no case are you required, because it is a supply, to account for it. The kid's little sister throws it out the window, or or he loans it to his best friend and his best friend never gives it back. that's not a problem because it's a supply.
So I think we're going to do one more question and then we'll turn it over for our effective practices section. We'll then come back for more questions. I think people are very confused from SSS about no cost extension versus carrying over. They have never done this from a 5th year to a 1st year. So can you just go into great detail about how you mean that the final year that they could carry over into their 1st year of their grant?
Typically, in normal times, the department doesn't let you do this. Okay, in normal times, the concept of they don't let you take money from one grant and take it into another grant period. In this instance, they are utilizing an authority they always utilized, but they only utilize that authority in the cases of institutions that did not get subsequent funding. But in this instance, they're going to utilize that same authority for anybody who requests it. They don't say for anybody who requests it, but they essentially saying they're going to extend their use of the ability to take money forward. This is in the same section of the OMB Super Circular as the section on carryover. So they have the same effect on your campus. They are handled differently in the accounting of the Department of Education. So, but they have the same effect on your campus. So if this year, at the end of August, you have $15,000 that you have not spent, there are conditions, and I can pull up the conditions on extending the date, but they have to do with, you have to notify the department at least 10 days before, at least 10 days before August 31st. You can't ask for the money, the extension in the date just to spend the money. So you have to reference, again, this is all for purposes of documenting it in your program specialist files and in your files, that to conduct an activity or to do some things that you planned on doing.
Maureen, you have
You weren't able
frozen.
to do because of COVID-19.
Maureen, you
Okay.
froze that whole last paragraph.
That's okay. Is it working yet?
Yes, it's working now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So from your perspective, you have to handle it differently, but the major difference in it is in the way the Department of Education documents it, not the way you utilize the funding. You have to ask for it, where carryover happens automatically. That's the biggest difference. And the other biggest difference is typically they don't utilize this authority that they have. This time they are utilizing this authority. In this time they're utilizing the authority. But from your point of view, it essentially is just like carryover, except you have to jump through a couple more hoops.
All right, well, we're going to turn it over to our effective practice section. We're going to have Scott Robertson, who's the Assistant Dean of Students for TRIO and Diversity, talk about making your program indispensable. Thank you, Scott, for being here with us today. And once he has concluded, we will come back and answer any last questions that we may have. So, Scott, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay. Where I can share my screen, Angelica, for my presentation. You're muted.
I've made you co-host. Can you do it now?
Let me see. Can you all see Let's see, I always forget how to do this.
Go to share screen and then pull it up after
There
you.
we go.
Let's see. Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Awesome. So I know there's some people that are on the call today that were here yesterday. So if you need to go to the restroom, feel free to do so. Also, I'm going to go ahead and apologize now. My pets seem to be very needy at this moment. So if you hear a cat meowing, just ignore that. I don't have children, I have pets that act like children. So today, we're going to talk about making your program indispensable during COVID-19. As Angelica said, I'm the Assistant Dean of Students for TRIO and Diversity Programs at West Virginia University Institute of Technology. But before we begin today, I actually want to take a moment and just a moment of silence. We're going through a lot in our country right now, and it's just not us, it's our students, it's our colleagues, it is the families that we serve, it is every facet of our country is experiencing things they've not experienced before. So I'd ask that you just take a moment, send out positivity into the world, because we need as much positivity as we can get right now. And remember to go vote. If you're in a state that has an election, a primary today, like the state of West Virginia, please go vote. Your vote matters. I can't say that any more than anybody else probably on this call, but please go vote. So some institutional background about my campus. We are located in Beckley, West Virginia, and we are a regional campus of West Virginia University. One of the things I think that makes my campus unique is that 3 summers ago, we picked up and moved our entire campus 40 minutes down the road. And I mean everything. Everything moved. We had to resettle into a new location, and we had to think critically about services, especially for our TRIO SSS program, about how that would impact how we would serve students moving forward. So in a way, it was a good precursor to figure out how to handle things during COVID-19. We are a rural campus. There's about 1,700 students in southern West Virginia in a town of about 17,000. We do pride ourselves on being a #1 return on investment in the state of West Virginia for our students, and #7 nationally. And finally, regarding COVID-19, all of our classes transitioned to online learning on March 30th. Classes that were already happening online in the semester actually went back to class on March 23rd after our spring break, but all other classes had an extra spring break week to allow for transition to online classes. Another thing that happened to our institution, as I'm sure has happened to a lot of institutions across the country, is the WVU system announced furloughs on May 8th. And the furloughs went into effect on May 24th, and there were 1-month furloughs and 2-month furloughs. There were 875 employees across the WVU system that were furloughed, including 50 on my campus. Most employees that were furloughed were administrative assistants, as well as individuals with our facilities department. However, our student life department took a pretty big hit, because folks who were working on orientation and service and learning were furloughed, and their work was redistributed within the division. So we've had a lot of issues to deal with as far as furloughs and redistributing of work for folks that are outside of TRIO. So this is where TRIO actually becomes indispensable on our campuses, because there's a lot that we can do, because for us, we should not have been furloughed, because we are grant funded, and it would be silly of an institution to furlough folks who were grant funded. So the first thing I want to talk about is grant aid. If available to offer grant aid, if you're an institution on a program that already offers grant aid, understand that that's one of your biggest retention incentives for this coming fall. We received the FAQs from the department, and we're still waiting on some answers, as Maureen said, as far as the institutional match. My institution is required to do the match, so we are still waiting, hopefully that we will be able to get that waived, even though it is part of the law. Who knows what can happen? It's 2020, honestly. And again, with the waivers for the funds for upper class students, we have to remember that our students that we serve are some of the hardest hit during this pandemic. And they've taken on additional responsibilities at home. They're caregivers. They may have had to get a part-time job. They may have lost their job. They're trying to balance a lot of things at one time. So in order to get students on campus, think about how you can use your grant aid. For instance, my program, we've not used our full 20% that we were able to offer of grant aid from our budget. So students that are going to be enrolling for fall 2020, our classes start August 19th. Our budget year does not end until August 31st. Therefore, we can actually assist first year and second year students with the cost of paying for school. So please keep that in mind as you have an additional tool to help students return to campus and help keep costs low for those students. Also, think about tutoring. I point out here that a lot of institutions have used up their federal work study money, or they've used up the funds that they may have had for summer for tutoring because of what's going on with the pandemic, and they've had to freeze budgets. But within our TRIO programs, we can offer tutoring. My program, we offer a professional math tutoring. We even hired peer tutors for the summer to help our students who are taking classes in the summer. Again, that helps with retention. You're retaining students for the institution, but also for your program to meet your objectives. And also we offer online tutoring, which we go through a company called Photo Study that has been very valuable to our students, especially those students who may not necessarily like in-person tutoring. They really like the fact that they can do something online and it saves it to their phone and so they can use it later. Another thing to think about, for those of us that are in our 5th year and we're winding down our grant cycle, if you've not done a summer bridge, think about offering one. Make it a few days with best practices, sessions no longer than 20, 25, 30 minutes with a break in between. And this allows you as a program to really make connections to these new students that are coming in. We know that one of our biggest strengths as a TRIO community is that we are a family. And that's what helps our students. They learn to lean on us. They know to come and seek us out. So the more that we can reach out to those students before the start of the academic year, the better off they're going to be when they start classes in the fall. Also think about, what do these students need to be successful if classes are offered in seat at your institution, or if it's virtually or a hybrid of both. Think about time management, how important self-care is, as well as institutional policies. A lot of times students may be attending these virtual new student registration days and they're just kind of given a pack of information to review and it doesn't go over in detail. So look at those policies and the information that they're getting from the office that handles orientation on campus and break that down for them. That will also help them feel more comfortable when they're adjusting to life on campus in person or virtually. A first generation celebration. This would be a great time to start planning a first generation celebration. My campus does not have an office specifically for first generation students. That's kind of become the responsibility of TRIO SSS. Now we only serve 215 students on our campus, and all those students, as we know, are not necessarily first generation students. So we actually took the initiative when COE and NASPA announced this initiative in 2017 and held its initial celebration on campus. But actually last year, we grew that out to an entire week-long celebration where we had different activities throughout the week, and I'll share with you what the calendar looked like for that week. But on our website, we actually host a page called First Generation Week. And that features stories from program participants, alumni, faculty, staff, and administration. And what's great is we host that on our social media. We provide links to that, but also then our institution shares that information. And if a student or a family is looking for information about first generation students, it pops up in the institution's search box. So then that drives more students to our page. In 2019, we actually applied for the COE and NASPA grant to help cover the cost of our first generation celebration. And like I said, it's a campus-wide celebration. We invite folks from every level to come together and then have a discussion, talk about issues that face first generation students. And who knows better than how to assist first generation students than TRIO professionals. And then we also host the First Generation Week information on our program website. As you can see here, this was our schedule for the 2019 First Generation Week. We actually partnered with a local artisan who came in and worked with students on how to paint a statue on campus that everybody takes their pictures with, so that when they graduate, they will actually take that artwork home with them. You know, they get it afterwards. They also have something to look back upon their experiences at our institution, because that is specific to WVU Tech. We also took that artwork and put it on display at our first generation celebration. So folks who were not part of the Paint a Piece class got to see the work that students did during that activity. We had a first generation discussion panel. We invited our provost, who is a first generation student herself and who talks publicly about the struggles she faces as a first generation student. So we had some really great dialogue, and it was just not student support services participants who took part in these events. There were students who were not in our program who actually took part and were able to learn about the struggles that their peers faced while they were in college. Another thing that we did was we partnered with a local bank to come in and talk about financial literacy. They are the experts, and we wanted our campus wide to know that there are ways to buy a house. A lot of our students don't understand the language or even had considered owning their own home. So we actually broke down the process to purchasing a house, a home loan, all of that. And that was probably our second best attended event of the entire week, which a lot of times you wouldn't think that financial literacy would be something that students would really latch onto, but they really loved this. And then finally, we just did a first generation advocacy table, and we asked students that were in our program to write thank you cards to members of Congress about being in TRIO, but then we asked students who were Pell Grant recipients to write thank you cards as well, and we were able to get those delivered to our members of Congress. Just little things, but again, that gets attention on your program for that week. You partner with so many other folks, but also you get the press from your university relations office, and we all know if it's good press, we want the good press. Retention efforts. We had a campus meeting a few weeks ago, and our campus president, who's a wonderful woman, told us that she said, I want just one more student than last year. And I think we all would agree that that's what our campus presidents or our chancellors would want, as one more student given what we're going through across the country. So I would really recommend, and this is what we're doing in our program, is reaching out to students who were in our TRIO SSS program, say last fall, but didn't come back in the spring or even the year prior. We still have access to that information. So why not reach out to them and see if they're considering coming back to school? They may have taken a job and been laid off, their family situation may have changed, and they may be able to come back to school. Not only does it help you meet your program numbers while you're recruiting new students, but it also helps the institution in the long run. And then freshman seminar. Institutions have furloughed folks they've not renewed contracts for faculty who may be adjunct, and they're going to need people to teach classes. And I'm not sure if your institution is like mine, but sometimes people don't want to teach the freshman seminar class because they feel like it's a fluff class. It's a box that students check off on their plan of study. But this is a great way for you to reach out to students in your program and have a section only for your participants. It also assists with your retention and also the retention of your institution. I was able to do a little study with students who were in my course one year that were in our program versus students that were not in our program, and share that retention information with my supervisor as well as our provost, showing that the intensive services that we were providing in SSS were paying off and we were retaining students at a higher number versus students who were not in our program or were not eligible. And again, you know, I mentioned earlier about building camaraderie, the family that we build within our TRIO programs, and Freshman Seminar really allows for that. And a great discussion, students start to feel comfortable in a new classroom setting because they don't know people that, that are around them in their class. So this really helps build the camaraderie and helps students having someone else to lean on. And what I think is great about this personally is if a student isn't turning in assignments for Freshman Seminar, what assignments are they not turning in their other classes? And so it allows staff to get an early warning sign, so to speak. And if they're not, like I said, turning in an assignment for how to make a calendar for classes and not turning in their chemistry homework, there's some problems that we need to work through. And this allows the program to get a head start on that we may not have picked up on in an interview or when we first met the students. So it's really a great way to reach out to these students. And that is actually the end of my presentation. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. I'm also in the crazy world right now of planning a virtual summer program for Upward Bound, and it's my first summer doing so. I will definitely get back to you. Angelica, I will turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. We appreciate all the information that you have just shared with people. We're going to get back to the questions. We have about 15 minutes. So, there's a lot of questions, Maureen, about grant aid. The first question, about the matching, do they still need to match the funds?
Right. We've not heard back from them yet about our request that they waive the match. Just to clarify, the CARES Act gave the department the authority to waive both legislative and regulatory requirements. So they have the authority. So that's to waive legislative requirements. The 20% match is a legislative requirement, but CARES gives the department the authority. As of yet, they haven't made a decision whether they're going to utilize that authority or not.
So people want to know if they did not write grant aid into their proposal, can they give grant aid?
Yes. Again, the section of the OMB circular that is applicable is section 200-308, and it is programmatic and budget revision. And it outlines 7 times when you need to get prior approval for doing something. Adding a line item is not one of those 7 things that you need prior approval for. So even if number 13 in the frequently asked question wasn't there, even if you didn't have grant aid in your budget before, you would not have needed authority. You would not have needed approval to add it. So in any year, if you had money that you hadn't spent, you could have moved it to grant aid.
Also, please note that if you add grant aid, you must follow the regulations within about grant aid, as Maureen just said about the matching. If you're not Title III, Title V, you have to you have to award the minimum. You can't Pell. Students have to be Pell eligible, and they have to be for unmet need for first and second year students before giving to third or fourth year students.
Now, COE is going to continue to press the department to waive the match, to waive the requirement that direct aid only go to first and second year students, but we have not heard on that.
It says, can we give grant aid in the summer to students who were only enrolled in the fall or spring?
If they're going to be enrolled in the summer, sure.
They have to be enrolled in the summer. Yes.
Right. Now the question is, I think this is the question, okay? I have a student who was enrolled in the spring. She had a need of $10,000. She got financial aid of $7,000. Can I now give her a grant to reduce her unmet need from $3,000 to $2,500? Yes, you can give grant aid now, as well as as long as she had unmet need, it was for that period. I don't think that there's any requirement that now you should award this. Remember, this is financial aid, so it needs to be awarded, decided on the award in conjunction with your financial aid office. So this is one of those situations where you should follow the guidance of your financial aid office as to whether that would be an allowable thing to do.
Could an SSS program increase its grant aid amount, then provide grant aid to incoming freshmen who participated in a virtual summer bridge program?
Yes.
That one we taken care of. That one. Under number 12, I believe under the frequently asked questions, Maureen, the department says that some funds may be used to defray certain costs associated with changes in the delivery of instruction, or even to provide partial or full student scholarships. It is our understanding that the CARES emergency funds cannot be used to pay for tuition, provide scholarships. Is the language specific to the institutional portion of the CARES fund rather than the CARES emergency fund for students?
Okay, the CARES emergency fund for students has limitations on it. It cannot go into the student's account. It has to be paid directly to the student. Okay, the institutional money that goes to the institution also has limitations on it, and there's some questions as to the department was even as late as today talking about publishing regulations on both the emergency and but none of that has anything to do with your TRIO grant. And I don't think the question asked anything about TRIO money, did it?
No, I mean, it wasn't specific. Okay. So people want to know if in the final year, if they do initiate the one-time cost extension, will there be a limit?
Okay, well, think about this. Okay, I'm a student support services program that didn't spend any money. Okay, I had a $250,000 grant and I spent $15,000. If you were the Department of Education, would you impose a limit? Probably. Okay. Again, so I'm not going to say there's not going to be any limit. Are they going to allow you to have a no-cost extension of $50,000? Almost assuredly. Are they going to allow you to have a no-cost extension of $150,000? Almost no, probably not. So you have to, if you have money that's above $50,000, I would email Angelica and she will help you spend it before August 31st. I think Scott could probably help you spend it too. And in the last ditch effort, I would help you spend it.
You might be the first person I would start with, Maureen.
I'm good at spending money.
You are. Okay, we're switching over to electronic signatures. Someone asked, does that mean we can only have the student sign, scan, and email as a PDF, or can we still use DocuSign?
Sure. Oh, obviously you can use DocuSign.
Yeah. So what they're doing is just giving you flexibility during COVID-19 to have ways to take electronic signatures that you may not, that they would not otherwise take in a regular time. DocuSign is something that they will take during any time.
Okay, and remember, the only thing you need a signature on is your application.
Yeah, your eligibility requirements. Yeah.
Your eligibility requirements to say that they're low income, to document that they're low income and first generation and are a citizen or not here for a temporary purpose. So it is unlikely, but for anybody you're admitting this summer for next fall, those temporary signatures are valid, and you want to make sure that you cite that, if you keep that, so that people know that. I also wanted to kind of add to what Scott was saying. As his president, just wants to maintain enrollment. That's her effort. That's going to make his institution successful. The same is true in your institution. Your president is focused on making sure that their enrollment does not drop significantly. To the extent that you reach out to students who've been accepted to the program, who are eligible for the program, and you tell them about the program and encourage them to come to your institution, whether or not they become part of your program, it's certainly an eligible activity. It's something that you can do, something that's going to make your enrollment management office and your president very happy. So in addition, so think broadly, what do they really want to do that they can't do without you? And that's the kind of thing that you want to be trying to do. And all of you documented in your proposals that you wrote that you've got way more eligible students on your campus than you're able to serve. So that kind of reaching out to those students is clearly something that, in terms of your recruitment efforts and your marketing efforts, would be a allowable activity.
Okay, so someone has that, my university wants me to request a 10% reduction in the university match money in each of our grants.
Okay, so presently, let me understand what I understand. Reducing the match is one of those things that requires prior approval under 200.308.
Correct.
So you want to cite to your institution that doesn't require prior approval, that requires now notification. So you want to be using the words of the FAQs. I want to make sure that when they are saying that they want to request a reduction in match, that they that is something that they included in their budget when they submitted it to the department. If it's not in their budget, again, it's not something you have to notify them that you're doing. But even if it's in your budget, it's because it's a prior approval thing, you're notifying them as opposed to requesting approval of it, citing 200, citing number 13 on the frequently asked questions.
So another person's asking, can I move money from programming? So I think she means participant support costs is what I'm thinking, to personnel now without asking prior approval.
Yes, but again, you're going to, I presume this is a Mcnair program, because in student support services, the only participant support costs are direct grant aid. So if you're going to, or if you put something like, if you put a travel in participant support costs, that could be participant support costs. But again, this does not require prior approval because 13 takes away the prior approval requirement.
Can you talk about food for student support services? You know, in the SSS regulations, it states that they need prior written approval for meals and lodging for a cultural trip. Now people want to know, can I have meals for delivery while I'm delivering my services or a virtual workshop.
Basically, what these FAQs have said is they have not waived any of the TRIO regulations. The only thing they have done is they have utilized authority in the OMB circular to waive OMB circular requirements like prior approval or the extension of the end date of your grant. That's even true with something like Meals in Upward Bound or Talent Search. They're not allowing meals in Upward Bound. They're just saying that meals were allowed in Upward Bound and they can be in virtual as well as in-person programs. So I don't see anything in the FAQs that would allow you to provide meals for student support services. Mcnair, you would be able to, but not in student support services.
So someone asked, is there a cap for carryover in Mcnair? Can you say it one more time, Maureen?
No, there is no cap.
You can carry over anything, people, anything.
While you're looking, several Mcnair programs have brought to our attention that they are having issues with their financial aid office that is limiting the provision of stipends. If there's anybody on the call that is having this issue, will you put it in the Q&A box, just your institution and the fact that you're having a problem providing all of your Mcnair student stipends because of procedures imposed by your financial aid office.
So people are asking about the presentation that Scott provided today. That would go when we send this out to not only the people that were on the webinars, but we put it in our PD we call it the Professional Development Weekender that comes out sometime between Friday and Saturday. But it takes us typically 2 weeks to upload them to YouTube and get them ready. So that will go out when we have that information available. If loan computers are considered a supply, would book loaning not also be considered a supply and allowable?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to read all this out. I'm sorry, I haven't read it, and we might have already done this, but I direct a Mcnair program. My university recently implemented a new policy they say is to be in compliance with federal student financial aid policy. The policy states that the Mcnair stipend or similar grants, room and board, and any expenses that does not directly support research of students and faculty is an award, and the award is considered financial aid.
Okay, just get the name of the person.
Okay, and you'll get back to them?
We're going to try to do a call of Mcnair programs with the financial aid director and others that can help them solve that problem.
Hey, would it be good for me to send this name to you or to Nicole or to both?
To both would be good.
Okay. Let's see. A person in my institution said our SSS students cannot receive CARES Act funding along with SSS grant aid. That doesn't seem correct. Is it correct?
Ask them where they see that, where it says that in regulation, where that says that in CARES Act direction, where it says it doesn't say it anywhere. It's absolutely untrue. But remember, understand that the typical business and finance office, the typical financial aid office is in the business of rationing money. So they make a determination. They feel like, why should your students be special? Why should your students be able to get twice as much as some other student? Well, the fact is because your students have a priority at your institution. But you have to be able to understand why people are telling you this, not just that it doesn't say anywhere what they say it says somewhere.
All right, we have come to the 4:15 time mark. So if you haven't gotten your questions answered, please email Maureen Hoyler or Angelica Vilpondo. Maureen's email, you like how I say your name first, Maureen? Maureen's email is,
He's learning.
I'm learning, MAUREEN.HOYLER@COENET.org. You can also find our names and email addresses on our website. My email is a little bit longer, Angelica, ANGELICA, period, Vilpondo, V as in Victor, IALPANDO@COENET.org. Again, we thank Scott for joining us today. We thank each of you for sticking with us for 75 minutes. Right now, we're probably at 78 minutes. This concludes our webinar. And again, if you have any questions that haven't been answered through this presentation, do not hesitate to email us. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.